Now, our second section that I wanted to talk to you about is really about the reporting of child abuse. And it incites a lot of stress and anxiety in people to think about having to call in a child abuse report. And I can tell you that from personal experiences, from the initial times of being a social worker, and I had to make those first calls and what that was like for me, and also from the training of students where I'm teaching them how to make the calls. And then also when I've worked with family members who found themselves in a really difficult place of having to make a report on someone they loved and someone that they cared about. And it can be even more difficult if you're, maybe somehow not a part of the family, but you have a close connection to the child, and yet you're still worried what's going to happen to that child if I call in this report. So it is so common for all of these thoughts to come up when you're thinking about it. And this is the emotional aspect I was talking about. It's intimidating and it's scary because unfortunately, you don't always know what the outcome is going to be. And so it can be hard to be that person who steps up and says, hey, I'm going to get the ball rolling and I'm going to, contact the authorities and let them take it from there. But I want to share this with you so that you understand how important it is. It is our responsibility as a community to protect our kids. And this is something that we should be doing for one another. It's really important that in order for us to make sure that our kids are safe and that their needs are getting met and that they're going to grow up to be productive, contributing adults to society, is that someone has to be on the lookout. And by being on the lookout, I mean just having an awareness when you see something that doesn't seem right or seems abnormal or not, very uncharacteristic for that child that to be aware and to take action when you need to. And it's so important that we do that because the reality is that kids will report up to 6 or 7 times and try to give cues to adults and will sometimes just outright tell adults about what's going on in their lives. And if no one listens and if no one helps them and if no one takes action, they stop. And they don't tell anyone anymore. And they internalize it and they continue to live in a place of suffering where they're being harmed. And so it really then becomes our responsibility to listen when they come to us and tell us. I will tell you it is very rare for kids, especially those kids who are young, to make up stories of abuse. Yes, is there a reality that kids are sometimes coached? Absolutely. But I will tell you that for the most part, the majority of times a child discloses is because there is truth to that disclosure. And we really need to understand that. And so we have to then overcome our emotional barriers to what this all means in order to help a child. And that really means that you have to take that step and make the call and report. What I want you to know is that it's not your job to investigate these allegations. It's not your job to prove whether or not they're right and whether or not it's wrong. It's not even your job to gather and collect all of this evidence before you make the call. Your only responsibility is to pick up the phone and share your suspicions and your concerns. And what will end up happening is the professionals will then decide whether or not this actually meets the definition of abuse and if a report needs to be made. You also have the options, and depending on the state where you live, you can call in a report anonymously. You can also call in a report and give your contact information, but just specify that you don't wish to be contacted. And know this, that if you are a family member or you are a mandated reporter, meaning you work in the field of childcare, you're a teacher, you're a doctor, you work with kids, and you're a mandated reporter, which means you're required to report any signs of child abuse. Your information will actually be documented. Mandated reporters do not have the option of reporting anonymously. However, if you are not a mandated reporter, you do have that option depending on the state where you live. And I will say this, that anytime that you make a report, whoever you have alleged is the abuser does not get your information. They're not told that you're the reporting party. I will say that there are some circumstances where that information is shared, and it could be through whether law enforcement or you have other people involved in the investigation and they share that information. But an investigating social worker is is not allowed to actually give out the information of the reporting party to the person who is alleged to be the abusive caretaker or parent. So I want you to know that. Hopefully that brings you a little bit more comfort in deciding that this is something that you need to do and you need to move forward in making the call. Okay, let's talk about the actual reporting process. And it is fairly simple, and the great thing about those who answer the phone at the child abuse hotline is that they are trained and they really do have a whole structured interview process in where they're able to get the information that they need from you, and the phone call can go rather quickly. Now know that you have 3 different options for filing a child abuse report. You can do it by phone. You can also do it online in some locations, and you can also do it by fax. Yes, the child abuse registry still takes fax. So you have those as an option for reporting. I highly recommend making the call. When you make the call, you actually get to ask questions, and at the same time you also get to specify things like, I want to be anonymous, and I also, I prefer not to be contacted. Here's the information I know. You get to determine your contact information. I think it's just a better option because you have a little bit more control over your own private information at that point. So when you've decided I need to call this information in, I have very strong concerns and I need to report this, you would call the child abuse hotline. Now there's a national number that I'm going to share with you, and what the national number does is it basically finds out your area, the location where you're living, and then it directs you to the local child welfare agency where you live. And so your phone call will be directed to that child abuse hotline, and you will then start your call. What you can also do is you can go online and you can search to find the local child welfare agency where you live. And you can do that by looking for child abuse hotline, can be your search terms. You can search for child welfare agency, Department of Health and Human Services, Child Protective Services in your area. So try those and you should be able to get the number or the online version of filing your report. And once you do that, you will be connected with a screener and you'll answer a series of questions. And so there will be basic questions about you, your telephone number, and your relationship to the child. And then there will be other bits of information to really get an understanding of who the child is. So their name and their information, if you have it. Also their family information and information about where that child is currently located so that an investigative social worker can go out and contact the child. And they'll want to get any information about the background of the family if you have it and it's available to you. And once all that happens, and once you give them the information that they need, what they'll then explain to you is whether or not it's going to be an investigation. Some places may not even give you that information. They can just tell you that's all that they need, and they will tell you whether or not there'll be any contact in the future. That would be the opportune time to let them know that if you don't want to be contacted or if you're open to being contacted in case the investigating social worker has any questions for you. So that would be a good time to specify that. Also, you want to make sure that if you want, for your own documentation purposes, if you want to get a referral number, you can ask for that. You can also ask for the screener's name and their worker ID. And that way you can have some record of making the call. That's highly recommended for those of you who are a mandated reporter, that you ask for that information for your own documentation. And the organization or agency that you work with has probably already instructed you that that's really best practices. So that's really the extent of filing a child abuse report. I hope that makes you feel a little bit more comfortable about the process and gives you a little bit more confidence in making that decision. And also knowing that you really have done what you needed to do in order to help protect a child. And as I mentioned before, that really is all of our responsibility. Even if you're not a parent, it's our responsibility to make sure that kids are living in an environment where they're safe and that they're not being harmed. And when that does happen, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's an intention to punish someone, but it does mean that there's an opportunity to help a family. And we want to make sure that we're doing whatever we can as a community to ensure that families are getting the help that they need. So that's going to do it for this section on talking about the importance of filing a child abuse report and the process of how you go about filing the report. Now, if you find yourself in the position of wanting more information on this topic, or you're thinking, okay, I'm going to file the report, but I still would really like some guidance in doing that, and I'm also interested in other ways of how I can help a family and be supportive through this process, and this child is a part of my family. I'm a relative, so I'd actually maybe like the child to come stay with me if it doesn't seem that the parent is in a place to be able to provide a safe environment. All of these things may be coming up for you. And I want to offer additional help and support to you. I highly encourage that you go to nourishmind.com/guides, go to the guide page, and I want you to download the guide of If You Suspect Abuse. It is a detailed, comprehensive guide, and it is going to walk you through the entire process. And one of the things I really wanted to make sure that I was doing is, you could go out and find this information online, but very few resources out there will talk to you about how to deal with the emotional aspect of this, because that really is the biggest challenge, is that emotional barrier. I know you're worried about what this means for your relationship. I know you're worried about what this means for the kids. And I know you may even be worried about what this means for the parent, because this could be someone that you love and you're concerned about. So this guide really gives you help in determining what all of your options are and the different ways that you can show up for this family and really help them. Because one of the things we don't want to do is, we don't want to have this whole family be victimized by having to go through the process of the child welfare system and get stuck in that. And with your support and your help, they don't have to. So be sure to go get educated and get informed so that you can better help this family to overcome this challenge in their life.